In ancient China, it was once believed that eating cooked monkey brains could make a person smarter. But have you ever heard of someone baking cakes with human blood and selling them to unsuspecting customers? Or of someone making soap from the fat of the victims and selling it to their own neighbors? Our story today takes us to Italy, to a woman named Leonarda Cianciulli. She was born in 1894 in a small town called Montella near the city of Naples. Her mother's story was a tragic one. At the age of 14, on her way home, she was assaulted by a shepherd. That assault left her pregnant, and her family, desperate to avoid scandal, forced her to marry her attacker.
Her relationship with her mother worsened after her father's death, when her mother remarried another man. Leonarda became isolated and shunned, even by her own brothers and sisters. In 1917, she married a government employee named Raffaele Panzardi. Despite her family's opposition, they had planned for her to marry a wealthy relative. Despite their opposition, she proceeded with the wedding.
But during the ceremony, her mother stormed in front of all the guests, placed a curse on her, that all her children would die. This curse left a deep scar on Cianciulli's soul, and would later become one of the driving forces behind her horrific crimes. Cianciulli had a fiercely aggressive nature, and was imprisoned twice. First in 1918 for fraud, and again in 1919 for threatening someone with a knife.
In 1921, she moved to her husband's hometown, a small village called Loria.L. But her bad reputation soon caught up with her, and she became known among the locals as a quarrelsome, deceitful woman with an insatiable love for money. In 1927, she was jailed for 10 months on charges of swindling. After her release, she moved into a small house on the outskirts of the town of Ladonia. But in 1930, disaster struck. A devastating earthquake reduced her home to rubble.
Using the compensation money she received from the government, she bought a new house in the northern Italian town of Correggio. There, her life seemed to take a turn for the better. She opened a small shop selling clothes and sundries and became quite popular among the townspeople, none of whom had the slightest idea about her dark past.
For many years, a dark and terrifying shadow haunted Leonarda's life. On her wedding night, as we've mentioned, her mother had cursed her in a fit of rage. But even before that, a few years earlier, a gypsy woman had looked at her palm in horror and told her that she would bear many children, but they would die one by one. The gypsy's exact words were chilling. "In your right hand I see prison, in your left I see a mental asylum." Ordinarily, Leonarda might have dismissed her mother's curse and the gypsy's prophecy as mere superstition, if they hadn't started coming true. During her years of marriage, Leonarda became pregnant 17 times. 3 pregnancies ended in miscarriage, and 10 of her children died at a young age. With each pregnancy and each tiny coffin she had to bury, her belief in the curse grew stronger. She turned away from medicine and doctors who had failed her, and sought the help of fortune tellers and witches. One fortune teller gave her a chilling solution. The only way to break the curse was through a human victim. "Blood must be spilled to lift the evil," she told Leonarda. Haunted by nightly dreams of coffins containing her children, Leonarda made her choice. To protect them, she would do the unthinkable, offer up another human life. Italy's entry into World War II was nothing short of a nightmare for Leonarda. She became consumed with fear that her eldest son, Joseph, the apple of her eye, would be called up for military service. Joseph had dreams of finishing his studies at the University of Milan, but rumors were spreading like wildfire across the country. Mussolini was planning to draft all able-bodied young men into the army. For Leonarda, the decision was made. The time had come to offer a human sacrifice. She chose her victims with chilling precision, selecting them from among the women who frequented her shop. They were the kind of women about whom people might say, "When they're here, no one notices. When they're gone, no one asks." Lonely, desperate women, whose disappearance would raise no questions. Her first victim was a woman named Faustina Setitoet. Faustina had never found the man of her dreams, and disappointment weighed heavily on her. Desperate to change her luck, she turned to Leonarda, hoping she could lift the curse and help her find a husband. Faustina began visiting Leonarda regularly, until one day, Leonarda told her she had found her a job in northern Italy, and that the man of her dreams was waiting for her there. But there was one condition: she must tell no one. Poor Faustina arrived at Leonarda's home with a small suitcase containing a few clothes and all her jewelry. After offering her guest a glass of juice, Leonarda asked, "Did you tell anyone that I'm helping you find a job and your future husband in northern Italy?" "Of course not," Faustina replied. "I wouldn't want to ruin the effect of the spell you've cast for me, and I'm truly grateful for your help, Signora Leonarda." Leonarda had laced the drink with poison. After Faustina was dead, Leonarda dismembered the body and placed the pieces into a large cauldron. She baked cakes using the victim's blood and added soda to the boiling remains to make soap, which she then sold in her shop. Her second victim was a widow named Francesca Suavii. Leonarda lured her by arranging a teaching job for her in Piacenza, northern Italy, claiming she knew many officials. She asked Francesca to come to her house early on the day she was to leave town to receive her appointment letter, telling her to bring only a few clothes and all her savings. But Francesca's fate ended in the soap cauldron and the baking oven. The third victim was Virginia Cagiubo. Unlike the previous two, Miss Cagiubo was somewhat famous and beautiful, having worked as a soprano singer performing in prestigious Italian theaters. However, her beauty and fame were fading with age, so she turned to Leonarda for help to regain her former glory. Leonarda generously promised assistance, claiming she had found her a suitable job as a secretary to a nobleman, a high-ranking manager of theaters and opera houses in Venice. She then asked Virginia to visit her early on the day of departure to receive the nobleman's address and a letter of recommendation. Sadly, this was Virginia's doomed fate, and she ended up in the soap cauldron. Several days after Miss Cagiubo's disappearance, her brother's wife went to the police to report her sudden disappearance. She told them that Virginia had left with a small bag of clothes and all her savings, and that the last time she was seen, she was entering Leonarda's house. The police went to Mrs. Leonarda's house to inquire about Miss Cagiubo's whereabouts. She told them the story about the new job and how Miss Cagiubo had left for Venice. However, the police investigation soon uncovered Mrs. Leonarda's lies. The nobleman she claimed Miss Cagiubo was going to work for did not exist. This raised the police's suspicions. When confronted with her lies and threatened with charges of kidnapping against her son Joseph, Mrs. Leonarda quickly broke down and confessed everything in detail. She described the way she dissolved the bodies in boiling water, made soap by adding lye, and threw the remaining of the bodies into the drain. She also revealed how she used the victim's blood to bake cakes. The detectives found it hard to believe how a woman of her age and size could dismember a human body so quickly that even her own children, living in the same house, would notice. Mrs. Leonarda told them the entire process, from ending the victim's life, making smaller pieces, removing traces of the incident, to disposing of the bones, took her only 12 minutes. To verify her claim, the investigators took her to the city morgue, provided her with tools, and asked her to demonstrate her method on a body within 12 minutes. Remarkably, she completed the task right on time. Leonarda was put on trial, where she defended herself by claiming that she committed her crimes to save her children from death. She spoke about the ghost of her mother, who constantly appeared in her nightmares, threatening to take more of her children unless she brought fresh blood. However, the court was not convinced by these arguments. The prosecutor believed the real motive behind the crimes was to steal the victim's savings, and suspected that Leonarda did not act alone, accusing her eldest son of assisting her. But since no evidence was found against him, he was acquitted and released. Leonarda was sentenced to 33 years in prison, 3 years in a psychiatric hospital, and 30 years in prison. She died in 1970 and was buried in the Paupers Cemetery in Pozzuoli. No one claimed her body or attended her funeral. During her 24 years in prison, Leonarda continued to bake cakes, but none of the inmates dared to eat them. To this day, Leonarda's belongings and photos of the victims are displayed in the Crime Museum in Rome as a grim reminder of the horror of her crimes. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe and like.